The morning mist clung to the rocky shoreline of Newport, Oregon, as Dr. Samira Hassan made her way down the beach, collecting samples for her research. The tide pools sparkled in the dawn light, filled with fascinating specimens that might help unlock the mysteries of extraterrestrial biology. She hadn't expected her quiet morning routine to be interrupted by a crash landing that would change everything. The object cut through the clouds like a wounded bird, trailing smoke and debris. It wasn't a meteor. Its descent was too controlled, too deliberate. Samira watched in awe as it disappeared behind the cliffs, followed by a deep rumble that shook the sand beneath her feet. Taking only a moment to send an emergency alert from her phone, she sprinted toward the impact site. As a xenobiologist, she knew the protocols for potential extraterrestrial contact, but curiosity overcame caution. When she reached the crash site, she found herself facing something unprecedented. The vessel was clearly of alien origin, its organic curves and iridescent surface unlike anything in Earth's aerospace arsenal. But what emerged from the smoking wreckage stopped her in her tracks. 7 tall, elegant beings with silvery skin that seemed to shimmer in the morning light. Their features were almost human, save for the delicate fins that framed their faces and the subtle phosphorescent patterns that pulsed beneath their skin. One of them stepped forward, her movements graceful despite obvious injury. "I am Mihara," she said in perfect English, though her voice carried an ethereal harmonic undertone. "We seek asylum." Before Samira could respond, sirens wailed in the distance. She made a split-second decision that would alter the course of human-alien relations forever. "Follow me," she said, leading them away from the crash site and toward her research facility. Over the next few hours, as government officials scrambled to contain the situation, Samira learned their story. The Nixian civilization, despite its technological advancement, was rigidly hierarchical and bound by tradition. When their population began experiencing a mysterious decline in birth rates, the ruling council blamed these women, all prominent scientists and leaders, and sentenced them to exile. They refused to acknowledge the true cause, Niharet explained, her luminescent patterns dimming with sadness. "Our research showed environmental factors were affecting reproductive health across our entire species, but addressing this would have required significant changes to our industrial practices." Samira found herself drawn to their plight, not just as a scientist, but as a human being. These were brilliant minds, cast aside by their own people for daring to speak truth to power. She knew her decision to help them would have consequences, but she couldn't turn her back on them. As she worked to establish temporary quarters in her lab, Samira noticed something extraordinary. The Nixians' biological readings were fluctuating in response to Earth's environment, not declining, but adapting. Their exile might have accidentally led them to exactly what they needed, a fresh start on a world where their bodies could thrive. But their arrival hadn't gone unnoticed. News helicopters circled overhead as government vehicles approached the facility. Samira knew she had to act fast to protect both her new charges and the incredible opportunity for scientific advancement they represented. She reached for her phone and dialed a number she'd hoped never to need, her old colleague in the State Department. "James, remember when you said you owed me a favor? I need it now, and you might want to sit down for this." The first day ended with Samira standing before a hastily assembled panel of government officials, arguing passionately for the Nixians' right to stay. As she looked at their faces, some skeptical, some intrigued, she knew this was just the beginning of a much larger story. In the weeks following the Nixians' arrival, the coastal town of Newport transformed from a quiet fishing community into the epicenter of humanity's first meaningful alien integration program. Town council member Marcus Chen found himself at the heart of this unprecedented situation, working alongside Dr. Hassan to help the extraterrestrial refugees adjust to life on Earth. The morning sun cast long shadows through the windows of the repurposed community center as Marcus watched Nihara teach a group of fascinated local scientists about Nixian technology. Her silver skin caught the light as she manipulated a holographic display, explaining concepts that seemed to blur the line between biology and engineering. The connection between organic and mechanical systems in our society was seamless, she explained, her voice carrying that haunting harmonic undertone that still gave Marcus chills. Until it wasn't. That's when the problems began. But it wasn't all scientific exchanges and cultural learning. The practical challenges of helping 7 alien women integrate into human society proved both fascinating and occasionally comedic. Marcus couldn't help but smile remembering the day Zareen, another of the Nixian scientists, had encountered a cat for the first time. Her usually composed demeanor had crumbled into childlike wonder at the sight of the purring creature. "Your world pulses with such vibrant life," Zareen had said, carefully petting the cat. "On Nyx, we engineered much of the wildness out of our environment. I'm beginning to understand what we lost in doing so." The town's reaction to their new residents had been mixed at first. Fear and suspicion gradually gave way to curiosity and then acceptance, especially as the Nixians began contributing their knowledge to local problems. When Nihara and her companions used their advanced understanding of marine ecosystems to help the struggling fishing industry, even the most skeptical townspeople started to come around. One evening, as Marcus was helping Nihara set up her new apartment above the old bookstore, she paused in her work. "Your people surprise me," she said, her phosphorescent patterns creating gentle waves beneath her skin. "On Nyx, change is feared. Here, you embrace it, even when it arrives in forms as strange as us." Marcus leaned against the window frame, considering her words. "Maybe that's because we're still learning who we are as a species. Every challenge, every new perspective helps us grow." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent knock. Dr. Hassan burst in, her eyes bright with excitement. "The test results are back," she announced. "The changes we observed in your biology. They're not just adaptations, they're improvements. Something about Earth's environment is actually healing the damage caused by Nixian industrialization." Nihara's patterns flared with intense light. "Then our theories were correct. The Council's obsession with maintaining our artificial environments was the very thing destroying us." But not all news was good. Later that night, as Marcus reviewed the day's reports in his office, a classified message arrived from Washington. The Nixian government had finally responded to Earth's diplomatic overtures, and their message was clear. They wanted their wayward citizens returned, by force if necessary. Marcus looked out his window at the peaceful town, knowing that somewhere up there, in the vast darkness of space, forces were gathering that could shatter this delicate new harmony they'd built. He reached for his phone to call Dr. Hassan. They needed to prepare for what was coming. As he waited for her to answer, he watched Nihara walking through the garden she'd helped create behind the community center. Her silver form seemed to glow in the moonlight as she tended to the hybrid plants they'd developed using combined human and Nixian agricultural techniques. In just a few short weeks, she and her companions had become more than refugees. They were part of the community, part of Earth's story. He made a silent promise that he would do whatever it took to protect them. The Nixians had risked everything to speak truth to power, to pursue a better way of life. Now it was humanity's turn to stand up for what was right, even if it meant facing down an interstellar empire. The phone clicked as Dr. Hassan answered. "Samira, we need to talk. Things are about to get complicated." Dr. Samira Hassan's laboratory hummed with activity as she and Nihara pored over the latest test results. The data displayed on the holographic screens told a story that could change both their civilizations forever. "Look at these cellular regeneration rates," Samira pointed to a pulsing diagram. "The combination of Earth's natural electromagnetic field and your species' bioluminescent properties is creating something entirely new." Her dark eyes sparkled with excitement as she manipulated the 3D model. Nihara's patterns flickered with interest as she studied the display. "The quantum resonance is unlike anything we observed on Nyx. It's as if your planet's natural frequencies are harmonizing with our biological systems." Their breakthrough came late one night when Zareen noticed something extraordinary in her tissue samples. The Nixians' characteristic bioluminescence had begun synchronizing with Earth's natural rhythms. The tides, the magnetic field, even the subtle vibrations of the planet itself. Our bodies aren't just adapting, Zareen explained to the research team, her silver skin pulsing with excitement. They're evolving. The very qualities our council saw as flaws are becoming strengths in this environment. But the most stunning discovery came from an unexpected source. During a routine health screening, they found that the Nixians' reproductive systems were showing signs of recovery. The damage caused by generations of artificial environmental control was slowly being reversed by exposure to Earth's natural systems. Marcus arrived at the lab just as they were processing this latest finding. The diplomatic situation is getting tense, he reported, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of strain. The Nixian Council is demanding immediate access to your research data. Samira shook her head firmly. They'll only use it to discredit our findings. They're too invested in their current power structure to accept that their entire approach to environmental management is flawed. The tension was broken by a sudden burst of light from one of the sample chambers. Everyone rushed to observe as the Nixian cell cultures began exhibiting unprecedented levels of bioluminescent activity. "It's beautiful," Nihara whispered, watching the dancing lights. "This is what our bodies were meant to do, interact naturally with our environment, not be constrained by artificial controls." Dr. Hassan quickly documented the phenomenon, her mind racing with implications. "This could be the key to helping your entire species, if we can prove that your biology thrives in a more natural environment." Her words were cut short by an alarm from the upper atmosphere monitoring system. Multiple Nixian vessels had just entered Earth's solar system, moving fast. "They're not here for diplomatic talks," Nihara said grimly, her patterns dimming with concern. "The Council never negotiates when they can simply take what they want." Samira looked at her research team, then at the precious data they'd gathered. They had proof that could challenge the very foundations of Nixian society, but would they have time to use it? Marcus stepped forward, determination written across his features. "We need to get this information to every major scientific institution on Earth, immediately. If they try to suppress this research, we'll make sure the truth is too widespread to contain." As they worked through the night, broadcasting their findings through secure channels to universities and research centers worldwide, Samira couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. What had started as a chance encounter on a beach had evolved into a revolution in xenobiology, and perhaps the key to saving an entire civilization from its own rigid traditions. The lab's windows rattled as another Nixian ship entered the atmosphere. Time was running out, but they weren't giving up. Humanity had offered sanctuary to these brave scientists, and now Earth itself was proving to be the solution they'd been seeking all along. "Whatever happens," Nihara said, placing her luminescent hand over Samira's, "you've given us more than refuge. You've given us hope." The night sky blazed with the arrival of more ships, but inside the lab, the team worked on, racing to preserve the truth that could change everything. The real battle wasn't going to be fought with weapons, but with evidence, with science, and with the undeniable proof that sometimes the path to survival means embracing change rather than fighting it. The United Nations Security Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from Earth faced the imposing Nixian delegation. The alien diplomats' silver skin gleamed under the harsh lights, their patterns pulsing with barely contained anger. Ambassador Thendrix, the lead Nixian representative, stood at the podium, his voice resonating with harmonics that made the glass windows vibrate. "These females are property of the Nixian Empire. Their exile was a legally sanctioned punishment. Earth has no right to harbor fugitives from our justice system." Dr. Hassan sat beside Marcus in the gallery, her hands clenched tight as she watched the proceedings. Nihara and her companions were sequestered in a secure location, but their research data was about to take center stage in this interstellar diplomatic crisis. "With respect, Ambassador," the UN Secretary-General responded, her voice steady. "Earth does not recognize your empire's right to treat sentient beings as property. Furthermore, we have compelling scientific evidence that your council's policies are directly responsible for your species' reproductive crisis. A murmur rippled through the chamber as Samira's research was displayed on the massive screens. The data was undeniable. Charts, cellular images, and genetic analyses showing how Earth's natural environment was healing the damage caused by generations of artificial environmental control. "This is propaganda," Thendrix snarled, his patterns flashing crimson. "Our civilization has thrived for millennia under the Council's guidance. We will not be lectured by a primitive species that has barely mastered space travel." Marcus leaned forward, whispering to Samira, "They're scared. Look at their patterns. They're fluctuating exactly like Nihara's did when she talked about the Council's suppression of evidence." The tension escalated when the Chinese representative stood up. "We have independently verified Dr. Hassan's findings," she announced. "Multiple research institutions across Earth have replicated these results. The data is sound." Fendrix's composure cracked slightly, his patterns betraying his unease. "The Council demands the immediate return of our citizens and all research data. This is not a negotiation. We have the military capability to take what is ours." The chamber erupted in chaos as the threat hung in the air. Security personnel moved closer to the diplomatic parties, and the Secretary General called for order. In the midst of the uproar, Samira's phone buzzed with an urgent message from her lab team. The latest test results had just come in, and they were revolutionary. She quickly passed her tablet to Marcus, who studied the data with widening eyes. "Madam Secretary," Marcus called out, standing despite protocol, "we have new information that everyone needs to see." The screens flickered to life with fresh data, not just about the exiled scientists, but about the Nixian ships in Earth's orbit. Their crews were already showing the same biological responses to Earth's environment, even through their shielded vessels. "Your own people are proving our point," Samira announced, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet chamber. "Every Nixian in Earth's orbit is experiencing cellular regeneration. Your biology is crying out for what it needs, regardless of your political positions." Ambassador Thendrix's patterns went chaotic, shifting through colors as he processed this information. A younger member of his delegation stepped forward, her patterns showing signs of the very changes Samira had described. "The Council cannot suppress this evidence," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "Our ship's medical logs will confirm everything. We are all changing, just by being here." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about a group of exiled scientists anymore. It was about the future of an entire species. The Secretary General seized the moment. "We propose a compromise. Earth will share our research and establish a joint scientific mission to help the Nixian people, but the exiles remain under our protection, and your empire must begin transitioning away from artificial environmental controls." As the diplomats huddled in urgent discussion, Marcus turned to Samira. "Whatever they decide here today, nothing can go back to how it was before. Too many people know the truth now." Samira watched the Nixian delegation's patterns shift and swirl, a visual representation of their internal struggle between tradition and undeniable change. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "the hardest part of science isn't discovering the truth, it's getting people to accept it." The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance as they waited for the Nixian response, but for the first time since this crisis began, hope felt stronger than fear. 1 year after the historic UN summit, the coastal town of Newport had transformed into a thriving center of human-Nixian cooperation. The former community center now housed the Earth-Nix Joint Scientific Institute, where researchers from both species worked together to heal generations of environmental damage. Samira stood in her expanded laboratory, watching Nihara teach a group of young Nixian scientists who had defied their conservative families to study on Earth. Their patterns glowed with enthusiasm as they learned about natural ecological systems, so different from the sterile environments they'd grown up in. "The latest fertility reports from Nix are promising," Nihara announced, joining Samira at her desk. 3 natural births in the colonies that adopted our recommendations, the first in over a decade without artificial intervention. The news brought a smile to Samira's face. The council can't deny the results anymore. How are they handling the changes? Better than expected. Nihara's patterns shifted in amusement. Amazing what a population-wide fertility crisis can do to soften hardline positions. Outside, Marcus was giving a tour to a delegation of Nixian industrial leaders. The garden behind the institute had become a model for natural environment restoration, showcasing how traditional Nixian technology could be adapted to work with nature rather than against it. "Your world has taught us humility," Zareen said, approaching with a tablet displaying more research data. "We thought we had mastered nature through control and isolation. Instead, we nearly engineered ourselves into extinction." The integration hadn't been without challenges. Some humans still viewed the Nixians with suspicion, and many traditionalists on Nix continued to resist change. But the evidence of success was undeniable. In the thriving gardens, in the healthy children being born, and in the groundbreaking discoveries emerging from their collaboration. That evening, the Institute hosted a celebration marking the first anniversary of the Earth-Nix Accord. Humans and Nixians mingled freely, their differences now a source of fascination rather than fear. Samira watched as Marcus and Nihara shared a quiet moment in the garden, their subtle romance having blossomed despite the interspecies challenges. "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Marcus asked her, his hand tentatively intertwined with Nihara's luminescent fingers. "When I first crashed on this planet, I thought we were being sentenced to death," Nihara replied, her patterns creating beautiful auroras beneath her skin. "Instead, we found life. Real life, not the artificial existence we had accepted as normal." Ambassador Thendrix, who had once threatened Earth with invasion, now stood addressing the gathered crowd. His patterns showed the same healthy glow that all Nixians developed after extended exposure to Earth's environment. "Our ancestors believed they were protecting our species by isolating us from natural forces," he admitted. "We were wrong. Our survival depends not on controlling nature, but on learning to exist in harmony with it. Earth and its people have taught us this precious lesson." As the celebration continued into the night, Samira found herself in her lab, reviewing data from the latest experiments. The implications reached far beyond just the Nixian crisis. Their research was revolutionizing understanding of biological adaptation, environmental science, and the very nature of life itself. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Zareen entered, carrying 2 cups of earth tea, a beverage that had become surprisingly popular among the Nixians. "The council has approved our proposal," she said, her patterns brightening with excitement. "We're going to establish similar research institutes on other worlds. Your approach to scientific discovery, this openness to the unexpected, it's going to help us restore environments we thought were lost forever." Samira accepted the tea, its warmth matching the hope she felt for the future. What had begun with an act of desperation, 7 exiles seeking refuge on a strange world, had evolved into something revolutionary. Earth had not just offered sanctuary, it had become a catalyst for change, proving that sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from controlling nature, but from learning to listen to it. Outside, the garden glowed with the bioluminescence of Nixian plants harmonizing with Earth's natural rhythms, a living symbol of 2 civilizations learning to grow together. The stars above held not threats but possibilities, and somewhere out there, other worlds waited to share their lessons. The story of the Nixian exiles had become more than a tale of refuge. It was a testament to the power of truth, the importance of diversity, and the endless capacity for growth when different worlds come together in pursuit of understanding.